Have you ever looked into a mirror and felt like something was wrong? Imagine what would happen if your reflection stopped matching your movements and started acting on its own. In this chilling tale, the protagonist faces the unthinkable. His own reflection seems to come to life, and things spiral out of control. Keep watching to find out what happens when he tries to break free from mirror. And be sure to subscribe for more terrifying stories like this one. I had just gotten home from work, feeling drained. It was a typical day, with nothing out of the ordinary. But as I walked through the door, something didn't feel quite right. My apartment, usually warm and welcoming, felt colder tonight. The air seemed heavier, charged with something I couldn't explain. I shrugged it off, thinking it was just the exhaustion playing tricks on me. I dropped my keys on the table and went to the kitchen to grab a drink. As I walked through the living room, I heard it, a soft, faint sound coming from the kitchen. It was almost like the sound of something being moved around, something small and fragile. It made my skin crawl. I froze for a moment, trying to make sense of it. The apartment was empty, or at least I thought it was. There was no one here but me. Maybe it was the wind, I told myself, but that didn't explain the odd shuffling noise I was hearing now. I cautiously walked toward the kitchen. My heart pounded in my chest. The sound had stopped as suddenly as it had started, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I opened the kitchen door, only to find it completely empty. The countertops were still clear, the sink was empty. Everything was just as it should be. I looked around, my mind racing, trying to figure out what had happened. But there was nothing. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself. It was probably just the stress getting to me. I turned off the lights, deciding to head to bed, but then I heard it again, the faintest of noises, like someone breathing softly behind me. I spun around, but no one was there. I quickly turned the lights back on, my pulse quickening. I reached for my phone, hoping it would distract me, but then my phone vibrated in my pocket. I pulled it out, half expecting a message from a friend. Instead, the screen lit up with a message from an unknown number. It read, "It's not just your mind playing tricks." My heart dropped. I looked around the apartment again, suddenly aware of how quiet it had become. Was I imagining things, or was something really here with me? I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. But I had to be, right? There was no one here. Suddenly, the sound of something tapping on the floor broke the silence. My eyes snapped toward the hallway, but when I looked, it was empty. Nothing out of the ordinary. But still, that nagging feeling lingered. It felt like someone or something was watching me. I spent the rest of the night in a haze, trying to shake off the strange feeling that had settled over me. The tapping sound had stopped, but it left a lingering unease, like an invisible weight pressing down on my chest. I tried to convince myself that it was all in my head, that my mind had just been running wild after a long, exhausting day. But as the hours passed, I couldn't ignore the growing sense that something was wrong. Every little noise, every creak of the floorboards, every shift of air felt amplified, like I was being followed. I kept glancing over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone there. Around midnight, I finally decided to go to bed. I turned off all the lights, shut the door to my bedroom, and climbed into bed, pulling the covers up to my chin. But sleep didn't come. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes, shadows shifting in the corner of my vision, faint whispers that I couldn't quite hear but felt deep in my bones. I told myself it was nothing, just the mind playing tricks. But then I heard it again, the soft sound of something moving. I shot up in bed, my heart racing. I looked around the dark room, but there was nothing. I waited, listening intently, my pulse pounding in my ears. Another soft sound, almost like a whisper. I jumped out of bed and quickly turned on the light. Nothing. The room was still. I told myself to calm down. Maybe it was just the wind. Maybe I was being paranoid. But then the temperature in the room dropped. I could feel it in my breath, cool and misty, like winter air had crept in through the walls. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly feeling cold all over. I stood still for a moment, listening for any signs of life. And that's when I heard it, a faint creak, like someone shifting their weight, coming from the hallway just outside my bedroom door. I froze, unable to move. The fear that had been creeping up on me all night now exploded inside. The sound was so distinct, so real. It wasn't just my imagination this time. I gathered all my courage and slowly walked toward the door. My heart raced, and I felt the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. With a trembling hand, I reached for the doorknob and opened the door a crack. The hallway was dark, empty. Nothing. Just silence. But that silence felt heavy, unnatural, as if something was waiting just out of sight. I couldn't shake the feeling that something or someone was lurking just beyond the reach of the light. I stepped back into my room, shutting the door softly behind me. I leaned against it, trying to steady my breathing. There was no one there. It had to be nothing, just my overactive imagination, or maybe even the stress of the day catching up with me. But still, I couldn't get rid of the feeling. Something wasn't right. I glanced at my phone again, hoping for some distraction. But once more, there was a message from the unknown number. "I'm closer than you think." I dropped my phone, the words flashing across the screen still seared into my mind. Was it a joke? Or something more? At that moment, I couldn't be sure. But I had to find out. The next day, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every little movement, every noise, seemed to be a sign that something was following me. I tried to focus on work, but my mind kept wandering back to the message from the night before. "I'm closer than you think." Who was sending these cryptic texts? How did they know about the noises in my house, the fear that had been growing inside me? I was starting to wonder if this was more than just coincidence. It felt too personal. At lunch, I checked my phone again, almost unwillingly. Another message, this time from the same unknown number. "You still haven't figured it out, have you?" I sat there, frozen. The words seemed to pierce straight through me. This wasn't some random prank. Whoever was on the other end knew too much about me, about my thoughts, about what I was feeling. It was unsettling, and the paranoia was beginning to take hold. That night, I stayed in, determined to get to the bottom of this. I turned off the lights in every room except the one I was in. The air was thick with tension, and I kept checking my phone, hoping for an explanation. But there was nothing more. As I sat in my living room, staring at the screen of my phone, I thought I heard it again, the soft creak of something moving behind me. I jerked my head around, but nothing. No one. I stood up quickly, my heart pounding, and checked every room of the house, but once again it was empty. I couldn't understand it. I wasn't imagining things. I knew something was there, watching, waiting. The only place I hadn't checked was the attic. I didn't even like to think about the attic. It was dark, cluttered, and old. I hadn't been up there in months, maybe even longer. But now, for some reason, it felt like the place where everything was connected. I had to go up there. With my heart in my throat, I grabbed a flashlight from the kitchen and headed for the stairs. I wasn't sure what I was expecting to find. Nothing, maybe? Or something that would explain all the creeping feelings of dread that had been following me. I couldn't even begin to guess. When I reached the attic, I hesitated for a moment, standing at the base of the stairs. The old wood creaked under my feet as I slowly climbed up. The flashlight flickered, casting strange shadows on the walls. I reached the top, and the air was thick with dust. There were boxes scattered around, things left behind by the previous owners of the house. I moved slowly, my eyes darting around, trying to find anything that might give me a clue. That's when I saw it, a small, old box sitting in the corner. It was unmarked, just a plain wooden box, but something about it made my skin crawl. It felt wrong. I reached out for it, my hand trembling. And as soon as I touched the box, a cold chill ran down my spine. The temperature dropped suddenly, and I felt a wave of nausea wash over me. I didn't know what I was expecting to find inside, but as I opened the lid, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a mirror, small and cracked, with a faint engraving on the back. "I see you." The words seemed to burn into my mind. I dropped the box and stumbled back, the air feeling thick and suffocating. I needed to get out of there, fast. I bolted down the stairs, my heart racing, as if the air in the attic itself was trying to hold me back. The mirror, its cracked surface still haunting my mind, seemed to echo in my thoughts. "I see you." The words felt like they were alive, following me, lingering in my ears. I rushed to the living room, trying to shake off the panic, but I couldn't get the image of the mirror out of my head. I glanced at the clock, midnight. My phone buzzed again. I froze. Another message from the same unknown number. You didn't think it would be that easy, did you? I quickly glanced around the room, my eyes darting from one corner to another, half expecting something to jump out at me. The feeling that I was being watched grew stronger by the second. I was no longer alone. I could feel it. Something or someone was in the house with me. I didn't know how I knew, but I could feel eyes on my back. I had to be sure. I walked slowly to the hallway mirror, my feet making no sound against the wooden floor. The reflection staring back at me was the same as always, my own tired face, the disheveled hair from stress. But something wasn't right. It felt off, like there was something more in the reflection. I turned to look behind me, nothing. But the second I glanced back at the mirror, there it was. A shadow, faint but distinct, just behind my reflection. I gasped and took a step back. The shadow wasn't mine. It was darker, more menacing. I reached for my phone, hands trembling, and checked the screen. I'm getting closer. The words made my skin crawl. I was no longer in control. Whatever this was, it was following me, but it wasn't just in my house anymore. It was in my reflections. The shadow in the mirror moved slightly, as though it was watching me, mimicking my every move. I couldn't breathe. My pulse was racing, and the air felt thick, like I was suffocating. I had to get away from the mirrors. But where could I go? It was like the house itself had become a trap. I turned to the front door, hoping to escape. But when I reached for the handle, I noticed something even worse. The door was locked from the inside. I had locked it earlier in the evening, and now there was no way to open it. It was as if the house was refusing to let me leave. I tried every other door, every window, but they were all locked in the same way. I was trapped inside my own home, with no way to escape this growing sense of dread. Then I heard it. A faint sound, just above a whisper. It was coming from the mirror. I couldn't make out the words, but the tone was chilling. The shadow in the reflection was moving more rapidly now, almost as if it was reaching for me. That's when I saw it. The reflection of me, or, at least, the version of me in the mirror, smiled. A twisted, unsettling grin that I had never seen before. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. But the reflection, it stayed there. It stayed with me, waiting. Suddenly, the lights flickered, casting the room in darkness. And when they came back on, the mirror was gone. The house felt still, unnaturally silent, but I could feel something lurking in the corners. I had to leave. But it wasn't just the mirror that had changed. Something else had shifted in the house, something I couldn't quite explain. The fear was real. The fear was here, and it wasn't leaving anytime soon. The silence in the house was suffocating. Every sound felt amplified. Every creak of the floorboards beneath my feet sent my heart racing. The lights flickered again, briefly plunging the room into darkness. I jumped, my mind clouded with a mix of panic and confusion. My breath quickened as I stumbled backward, my body still in shock from what I had just witnessed. The mirror, it was gone, and with it, the strange shadow that had haunted my every move. But the eerie sense of being watched, of something lurking just out of sight, never left. I needed to get out. The house felt like it was closing in on me, its walls pressing in, as if trying to trap me inside. I grabbed my jacket from the coat hook by the door, fumbling with the zipper as my hands shook uncontrollably. I reached for the door handle, but my fingers were cold, numb with fear. Finally, I twisted it open and stepped out into the cool night air. The world outside felt oddly calm, like nothing had happened at all. The street lights flickered in the distance, and the neighborhood was quiet, almost too quiet. My heart was still pounding in my chest, but I didn't care. I just needed to get away from that house, away from whatever had been lurking inside. I walked down the street, my footsteps echoing in the stillness of the night. My phone buzzed again, and I pulled it out of my pocket, half expecting another message from the unknown number. But this time, there was nothing. The screen was blank. I sighed in relief, but it was short-lived. I glanced over my shoulder, convinced that something was following me, something that hadn't quite let go. The streets were empty, but I couldn't shake the feeling that eyes were on me, tracking my every move. Then, a car pulled up beside me. The headlights illuminated the dark street, and I froze. The car's window rolled down, revealing a man inside. "You need a ride?" he asked, his voice calm, almost soothing. I hesitated for a moment, looking at the stranger. There was something oddly familiar about him, but I couldn't place it. I nodded, too exhausted to argue, and got into the passenger seat. The car started moving, and we drove in silence for a few minutes. The man didn't ask questions, and I didn't have the energy to speak. The quiet was almost comforting, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I was still being watched. Something wasn't right. I could still feel the shadow following me, even in the car. Suddenly, the man broke the silence. "It's strange, isn't it?" he said, glancing over at me. "How the world feels different after something like that." I looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He gave me a strange smile. "You don't realize it yet, but whatever happened in there, it's not over. Not really. You might have escaped, but the fear is still with you." A chill ran down my spine. I wanted to ask him more, but before I could speak, the car came to a sudden stop. I looked out the window, and we were parked in front of my house. I turned to him, but the man was gone. The car was empty. I opened the door, stepping out onto the street, my legs weak and trembling. I glanced around, but there was no sign of him. The street was silent once again. Everything seemed normal. Yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed, that I had barely escaped something much darker. I went back inside, the house still quiet. Everything was as it had been before, too still, too perfect. But in my gut, I knew the truth. The fear, the reflection, the shadow, it was all real. It had followed me home, and now it was waiting. I couldn't escape. Not really. Did that story send a chill down your spine? If you want more creepy tales like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. Stay tuned for more spine-tingling horror stories right here. Your next nightmare is just a click away.